There was something unsettling about how quiet Jake Morris was. He moved into the last house on Bluebell Lane 3 weeks ago. A modest 2-story ranch with ivy already threatening to reclaim the gutters. No welcome barbecue, no small talk with the mailman, no doorbell greetings, just quiet. Except for the day he installed that thing in his backyard. From her upstairs window, Karen Dellington, self-appointed Queen of Willow Ridge and 5-time HOA president, watched as a crane lowered the strange metal disc onto a swiveling base behind Jake's house. It wasn't a typical satellite dish. This one was sleek, matte black, almost military in appearance. It whirred softly as it rotated skyward, its face blinking with faint blue lights. Karen's lip curled in disapproval. Ugly, she muttered. Absolutely not HOA compliant. Karen had built her life around rules, enforcing them, revising them, weaponizing them. In her mind, neighborhoods only stayed safe and civilized if someone ensured fences were the correct height and all front doors were painted neutral colors. A 6-foot alien-looking satellite dish. That was an act of suburban war. She clacked across her pristine kitchen tile, grabbed the binder she called her Covenant Codex, and flipped to page 46, Regulations, External Fixtures and Unapproved Modifications. Her heart fluttered when she saw the clause. All rooftop or freestanding communication equipment must be approved in writing by the HOA board and must not exceed 36 inches in diameter. She smirked. Jake's monstrosity was at least double that. She didn't need to ask. He hadn't filed a single request since moving in. She knew, because she'd checked. Later that afternoon, Karen walked the neighborhood under the guise of delivering newsletters. Actually just a single-page HOA threat memo about dog poop. But her real goal was to pass Jake's house and get a closer look. She paused at the edge of his lawn. The dish was angled upward now, slowly rotating, its lights blinking in a rhythmic pattern. There was a strange hum, just barely audible if you stood close enough. Not quite electrical, not quite mechanical, something else. Jake appeared in the side yard, wearing sunglasses and a ball cap. He carried a laptop and a coiled fiber optic cable. When he noticed Karen, he gave her a polite nod. "Afternoon," he said. Karen plastered on her tightest fake smile. "Hello, I don't believe you've submitted a fixture request form for that satellite thing." Jake paused. "Oh, it's not for TV. It's part of a scientific study. I already sent an exemption request to the HOA's email." Karen laughed softly. "Oh dear. You'll want to resubmit it through the proper form, and the board meets in 2 months. Until then, that unit it's already cleared." Jake interrupted gently. "Under the FCC's over-the-air reception devices rule, and I'm working with a NASA-approved program. Citizen Data Relay Array." Karen blinked. "NASA?" "Yeah." Jake nodded casually. "We monitor solar radiation spikes. It's linked to a larger grid that tracks geomagnetic anomalies." She had no idea what any of that meant. But she didn't like his tone. She didn't like being interrupted. And she certainly didn't like that strange dish humming in her line of sight. Jake gave her a small wave. "Have a good day." He turned and disappeared behind his fence. The gate clicked shut. Karen stood there a moment longer, her grip tightening on the crumpled newsletter. NASA or not, Jake had broken the rules. And in Willow Ridge, she made the rules. She marched back toward her house, already planning her next move, because that dish wasn't going to last the week. Karen Dellington had always said, "If you want something done right, do it in the dead of night with a flashlight and the full weight of the HOA behind you." 12:14 a.m. She slipped out her back door in a pair of pristine white sneakers and a camouflage windbreaker she'd ordered specifically for neighborhood enforcement emergencies. She crept across her manicured lawn, through the alleyway, and ducked behind the McIntyre's hydrangeas. Just in view of Jake's backyard, there it was. The dish stood tall and silent under the moonlight, pointed directly at the stars, like it was waiting for a reply. It was eerily still. No wind, no birds, just the soft chirp of crickets and the faintest hum coming from the dish's core. Karen raised her binoculars. Blue lights pulsed along the outer rim of the satellite, dancing in a sequence too deliberate to be decorative. Then the dish moved, just a hair, clicking a few degrees to the left, with a smooth, fluid grace. Karen stiffened. It was like watching a mechanical creature look around. She zoomed in, aiming the lens at a cluster of markings along the dish's base. There were numbers, a barcode, and a silver emblem. She couldn't read it clearly, but it didn't look like any brand name from a cable provider. No DirecTV, no Dish Network. This one looked governmental. She pulled out her phone and tried to zoom further. That's when it happened. The air around the dish shimmered. A low, almost imperceptible vibration pulsed through the grass beneath her. Then came the sound, like a deep exhale from some distant machine. Karen's phone buzzed in her hand. New Wi-Fi network detected. Orbital link, Sector 8, encrypted. She blinked. Sector 8. The screen flickered. For a split second, strange text appeared in a command window. White letters on black background. Receiving signal. Data stream active. Locking transmission from polar array. Alert. Solar interference. Spike. Anomaly tracking required. Karen's hands trembled. She backed up a step, then another, until a twig snapped beneath her shoe. The dish immediately rotated, snapping toward her position in a perfectly fluid, silent arc. Whirr! Click! Karen froze. A soft red laser line appeared from a sensor beneath. The dish and scanned across the yard, sweeping slowly like a searchlight. That was it. She was done playing games. She turned and bolted back through the hedges, nearly twisting her ankle on the McIntyre's lawn gnome. She didn't stop running until she reached her back door. Once inside, she locked it behind her, pulled the blinds, and pressed her back against the wall, heart thudding. Her mind raced. Was it actually scanning for her? Why was a civilian in a suburban neighborhood, hosting what clearly looked like military-grade equipment? And what exactly was this Sector 8 thing? Karen opened her HOA violation reporting form and began typing feverishly, but halfway through, entering unauthorized electromagnetic frequency emitter, she stopped. Because if she reported it officially, someone else might get credit for removing it. No, this had to be personal, swift, precise. She clicked Save as Draft and stared out the window at the blinking blue light across the lawn. Her jaw clenched. Jake Morris thought he could hide something strange in her neighborhood. Tomorrow she'd make a phone call. Not to the city, not to the authorities, to Dave, the HOA maintenance guy with bolt cutters and no sense of boundaries. That dish was coming down. Karen stood at her living room window, just after dawn, arms crossed, lips pursed, watching the dew glisten on Jake Morris's perfectly illegal lawn fixture. It hadn't moved since last night. No humming, no glowing. But to Karen, the silence made it worse. Like the dish was mocking her, waiting, hiding its secrets in plain sight. She didn't sleep. Instead, she stayed up finalizing what she called Operation Community Cleanse, complete with a clipboard, printed bylaws, and a very enthusiastic handyman named Dave. who only asked one question before agreeing to help. Will this get me fined? Karen had smiled sweetly. Not if I mark it down as a beautification emergency. By 9:30 a.m., she and Dave were standing at Jake's fence line. Dave had brought a red toolbox, a bolt cutter, and 3 cups of gas station coffee. Karen held the HOA compliance form, like a sword. You're absolutely sure about this? He asked, eyeing the satellite dish like it might bite. Karen didn't blink. It's a code violation, a visual nuisance, and potentially a danger to neighborhood birds. She left out the part about the dish, scanning her backyard like it was expecting visitors from Mars. Dave hopped the fence. It only took him 5 minutes to disable the gate lock from the inside. Karen followed, clipboard in hand, snapping photos. From every angle. Evidence, she told herself, in case this ends up in HOA arbitration. Up close. The dish looked even stranger. The metal was unlike anything Dave had ever seen, almost like matte obsidian. Cold to the touch. The control box mounted beneath it had no brand markings, just a QR code and a screen blinking a message in green. Connection lost. Attempting resync with polar array. Karen didn't care. Cut it, she ordered. Dave hesitated. This thing looks expensive. Karen leaned in. And it's not supposed to be here, which makes it illegal. Which makes it our duty to protect this neighborhood. Dave sighed, pulled a crowbar from his kit, and went to work. The satellite dish didn't go quietly. As soon as Dave cracked the control box, the blinking lights flared, flashing blue, then red, then pulsing yellow. A high-pitched sound started building, a whine that made Karen cover her ears. Just unplug it, she shouted. Dave yanked wires. Sparks flew. The dish shuddered once, twitched even, then slowly tilted downward, as if bowing in surrender. The base gave a low groan. The lights dimmed. The sound stopped. It was dead. Karen exhaled like a queen, conquering foreign land. Within 30 minutes, they had the entire unit dismantled. Dave hauled the parts into his pickup, while Karen supervised the cleanup. She left a copy of the violation, form taped to Jake's back gate. Notice of immediate compliance action. Unauthorized communication fixture removed. Violations. Aesthetic disruption. Height limit. Exceeded. No prior HOA approval. Further action may result in fines and/or lien application. Willow Ridge HOA President Kay Dellington. She even underlined President twice. Jake wouldn't return until evening. Karen planned to be out walking her dog, right when he discovered the aftermath. But as she stood in her driveway, feeling victorious, something prickled at the edge of her conscience. For a brief second, while Dave loaded the last piece of the dish into the truck, her phone buzzed. No caller ID, just a voice message that played automatically. Signal interruption detected. Research node offline. Investigation team en route. Coordinate trace. Bluebell Lane, Sector 8. Karen stared at the screen. Then, the message deleted itself, and the number disappeared. Jake Morris didn't knock. He stood in front of Karen Dellington's house at 7:42 p.m. Silent, still in his grey hoodie and jeans from work, laptop bag slung across his shoulder, and an expression that was unreadable, somewhere between stunned and cold. Karen opened the door slowly, bracing for his inevitable tantrum. She had rehearsed a dozen phrases in the mirror. You failed to comply with proper HOA protocol. Visual obstructions are not permitted. You should be thanking me for preserving your property value. But Jake didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just asked one question, calm and low. Where is it? Karen blinked. Where is what? My dish. He didn't call it a satellite. Didn't say antenna, just dish. And for a moment, Karen thought it sounded almost sacred. "I don't know what you think you were doing," she said, straightening up, "but that monstrosity violated at least 4 ordinances. You didn't even attempt to schedule board approval, and the size alone was a clear violation of article." Jake held up a hand. She fell silent. "I told you," he said. "This wasn't just for me. That was part of a distributed scientific relay. It was active, calibrated, and you didn't just cut power to it. You ripped it out, you destroyed it." Karen scoffed. "Then maybe you should have put a flag on it that said, 'Don't touch. Belongs to NASA.'" Jake looked at her with a kind of sadness, as if she wasn't even worth arguing with. Then he turned and walked away. She shut the door. An hour later, 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled into Willow Ridge. They didn't stop at Jake's house. They parked in front of hers. Karen was halfway through microwaving leftover lasagna when the knock came. This time it wasn't polite. 3 sharp raps. Measured. Intentional. She opened the door to find 2 people in black suits and lanyards. No badges, just government grey expressions and eyes that didn't blink. "Karen Dellington," the woman asked. "Yes, but if this is about, we're with a federal aerospace research agency," the man interrupted. "We're investigating a loss of data transmission from a government-partnered civilian node. Local trace shows last signal originated from this property. May we come in?" Karen laughed awkwardly. "I'm sorry. Are you trying to say that Dish was government property? Because I have no documentation, no stickers, no identification. I have photos. It looks like something from a Radio Shack catalog." The woman stepped forward. That Radio Shack equipment was a node in the Helios array, which is part of an early warning system for solar radiation anomalies. What you dismantled, disrupted. A real-time calibration sweep, coordinated across 6 countries. Karen blinked. "You can't be serious." The man opened a folder and handed her a document. It wasn't threatening, just official. Very official. Government seal. Acronyms? She didn't understand. But one thing stood out. Interruption of federal scientific instrumentation. Initial notice of investigation. Karen's mouth went dry. But it was in violation of HOA rules. "We don't answer to the HOA," the woman said flatly. "And neither does NASA." Behind them, Jake stood at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, watching silently. The agents didn't push their way in. They didn't threaten her. That was the worst part. They just left the folder in her hands and walked away. Karen stared down at the page, the full weight of what she'd done pressing down on her like lead. The last line of the letter made her knees lock. "A secondary federal agency will contact you within 72 hours regarding the assessed value of the lost research asset." She dropped the paper like it burned. For the first time in her life, Karen Dellington had broken a rule bigger than hers. The next morning, Jake Morris was already on his roof by 6:30 a.m., a wrench in one hand and a coffee thermos in the other. His neighbors whispered from their porches, unsure whether to avoid him entirely or offer an apology on Karen's behalf. They chose silence. Karen, for the first time in years, didn't walk her dog. She didn't patrol the street for trash bins out of place. She didn't even open her blinds. Because inside her home, she was rereading the notice the agents had left behind. Helios Research Node. Designation, Omega-6 linked arrays. 14. Sweden, Chile, Alaska, India. Downtime impact. Risk. Tier 2. Data cascade. Interruption estimated equipment. Value, $4.2 million. She couldn't even process the number. $4 million. In her backyard. That was the cost of a dozen townhomes in Willow Ridge. Her hand shook as she reached for her phone. But she couldn't bring herself to call the number on the notice. What would she even say? That she mistook a global solar warning device for an ugly lawn ornament. Jake, meanwhile, wasn't rebuilding the dish. He was building something else. By noon, a new frame was rising in his backyard. Steel scaffolding shaped like a skeleton arch, lined with coiled wiring and sensor bulbs. But this time, he had help. Two younger men in matching grey NASA polos carried equipment from a government-marked van. They worked quickly, quietly, professionally. Jake barely spoke until someone asked the wrong question. "Hey man," said the taller tech, "why didn't you set this thing up on the old site in Arizona? The Mesa lab still had room, right?" Jake tightened a bolt with sharp precision. "Because they don't have what I have here." The tech looked confused. "What, HOA drama?" Jake smirked faintly. "No, magnetic window. This neighborhood sits on a micro-distortion ring, one of the cleanest in the Western Hemisphere." Karen, who was eavesdropping through a cracked window, felt a chill creep down her neck. She had no idea what any of that meant, but it didn't sound like something that belonged in a suburban cul-de-sac. The second tech asked, "Did you tell the agents about the second ping?" Jake's face went still. "I logged it," he said, slowly. "But I didn't send it through yet. There's too much risk." "Risk of what?" Jake didn't answer. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. Again, she found herself obsessively Googling terms from the document. Helios array, omega-6, solar anomaly forecasting, and magnetic distortion windows. Most of it went over her head, but one article made her heart thud. Certain locations on Earth experience abnormally high geomagnetic conductivity, micro hotspots that allow deeper atmospheric readings. They are rare, unpredictable, and difficult to monitor without advanced sensor technology. There was even a map. Karen zoomed in. Bluebell Lane was glowing red. She leaned back, goosebumps crawling up her arms. Was this what Jake meant? Was this why he moved here? Suddenly, her doorbell rang. It was 2:18 a.m. She froze. When she finally worked up the courage to peek through the peephole, no one was there. Just an envelope taped to her door with plain masking tape. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single photo. It showed her backyard, taken from what looked like above, maybe from a drone or aerial cam. But it wasn't just a picture of grass and shrubs. It showed her, standing in her backyard, staring directly at the satellite dish. And behind her, barely visible in the top left corner, something else, a shape in the sky, blurry, wrong watching. Karen's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This wasn't about HOA violations. This was about something bigger, and whatever it was. It had been using Jake's equipment to look back. Karen Dellington sat at her kitchen table, the photograph trembling in her hands. Outside, the streetlights buzzed softly, casting long shadows across Bluebell Lane. But it wasn't the shadows that frightened her now. It was what was above them. The blurry object in the sky, half obscured by clouds, captured in the upper corner of the photo, wasn't shaped like any plane she'd seen. It was too wide, too symmetrical, and it had no lights, no wings, just a dark crescent shape hovering over her yard, like it had been there for a while. Watching, surveying. She set the photo down carefully and tried to call the number on the government notice. It rang once, then her screen went black. Her phone shut off completely. No battery warning, no glitch, just gone. She turned on the TV for noise. Something familiar. Every channel was static. Every single one. Outside across the street, Jake was on his roof again, this time not assembling anything. just watching the sky. Karen didn't even realize she was walking across her lawn until her slippers hit the sidewalk. She marched to his driveway, no clipboard, no HOA badge, just fear. "Jake!" She called up to him. He turned slowly. His face was drawn, pale, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "You got the photo?" he asked quietly. Karen swallowed. "What was that thing?" He didn't answer for a moment. Then, "A listening probe. At least, that's what we think. It's not from here." Karen stared. "Like, not from the US." Jake shook his head once. "Not from Earth." She almost laughed. Almost. But the dead phone in her hand and the static on her TV killed any hope of humor. Jake climbed down and walked toward her, lowering his voice. "There are anomalies we've been tracking, signals that ride solar radiation, bursts. They're faint, low frequency, embedded in the noise of space weather. We use the dish to decode them. You tearing it down didn't just interrupt a data stream. It sent a pulse, a blank spot, a silence." Karen furrowed her brow. So that silence was like ringing a dinner bell," Jake said grimly. "They noticed." Karen's skin prickled. "Who's they?" Jake didn't respond. Instead, he looked up at the sky. She followed his gaze. The stars had vanished behind, a strange fast-moving layer of dark clouds. Too uniform, too low. And they weren't moving like regular clouds. They drifted against the wind. Karen took a step back. No, I don't believe in aliens, or cloaked ships, or you believe in rules." Jake interrupted. "And the people who put that dish in my yard, they made rules too. Don't draw attention. Don't transmit out of sync. Don't leave blind spots." He looked at her, eyes sharp. "You broke all of them." Suddenly, a deep subsonic hum rolled through the air, rattling the windows and causing the ground to tremble just slightly. Karen grabbed Jake's arm. "What was that?" Jake's jaw tightened. "An arrival." Lights flickered across the neighborhood. One by one, houses went dark. Karen's porch light fizzled out. So did Jake's. Streetlights popped like dying. Stars. And then, total black. Only one thing remained illuminated. The new arch. Jake had constructed. The partial frame of a replacement dish began to glow with a pale white-blue light. A signal pulsed from its core, casting eerie shadows in all directions. Jake looked at Karen and whispered, "They're not here for me." Karen blinked. "What do you mean?" "They're here," Jake said slowly, "because you looked back." Karen stumbled backward as Jake's words echoed in her mind. "They're here because you looked back." The glow from the incomplete satellite frame bathed the street in pale light. Her heart pounded so hard, she could barely hear anything else, but she could feel it, something overhead, massive, silent, watching. Jake stepped forward, shielding his eyes from the glow. "We always thought the probes were random, automated, drifting through cosmic data streams. But the Helios readings were never random. They always centered around one pattern, one frequency." He turned to her, voice low. "You, Karen," stared at him. "What are you talking about? I'm not special. I've never even left this town." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Exactly." He opened a case on the ground and pulled out a sleek tablet-like device, its screen flickering with a strange, unreadable waveform. Every data burst that Helios caught over the last 8 months was synchronized to one thing: a biometrics signature. At first we thought it was interference. Then we triangulated it. He handed her the screen. It showed a top-down heat map of Willow Ridge. A single point glowed red. Her house. Her. Karen felt the blood drain from her face. This has to be a mistake. I'm just a retired dental hygienist with a perfectly normal background. Yeah, we looked, Jake interrupted, which is why it's even stranger. No medical records before age 6. No birth certificate. Adopted from an unnamed clinic that no longer exists. Do you know where you came from, Karen? I was told it was some private practice in New Mexico. Jake nodded. Near White Sands Missile Range. Karen froze. He continued. My team ran scans when the original dish was operational. We detected something in your proximity that shouldn't be biologically possible. An electromagnetic echo, like a tag, like a beacon. Every time you walked past the array, the frequency spiked. I didn't ask for this, she shouted, trembling. But they marked you, Jake said quietly. Years ago, maybe when you were a baby, maybe before. Karen's mind reeled. She remembered faint flashes of things she couldn't explain. Dreams of light, lost time during thunderstorms. The strange mole on her wrist that sometimes tingled when lightning struck nearby. She always thought it was coincidence. Now, she wasn't. So sure. Suddenly the ground shook again. But this time, it wasn't from above. It was beneath them. Jake looked around. They're not just here to observe anymore. From behind her, a low mechanical whine began to build. She turned and saw something rising from the field behind her home. Sleek, metallic, triangular, not flying, unfolding, a ship, not massive, but not small either, like it had been buried there for decades, waiting to be summoned. Karen whispered, Why now? Jake looked grim. Because you triggered it. Tearing down the dish interrupted the signal, long enough for the failsafe to activate. That silence, it told them Earth didn't have the infrastructure to hide you anymore. Karen backed away, eyes wide. What did they want from me? Jake didn't speak. He didn't have to. The hatch on the ship opened. Blinding white light spilled out onto the grass. Karen dropped the photo from earlier. It fluttered in the wind and landed face up. Her backyard, her silhouette, and the shape above. Only now she understood. It wasn't watching her. It was waiting for her. The light pulsed once, and her wrist, where the strange mole was, began to glow in sync. Karen stood paralyzed, staring into the blinding white light, pouring from the ship's hatch. The glow from the object on her wrist pulsed with the same rhythm, an undeniable, synchronized heartbeat. Jake whispered behind her, You need to make a choice. Right now. I don't even know what I'm choosing, Karen shouted, voice trembling. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. The ground around the ship vibrated gently, humming with a frequency that made the air feel thick. The neighborhood, Bluebell Lane, was completely silent. Not a dog barked. Not a single light flickered. The ship's presence blanketed everything in eerie stillness. Jake walked toward her slowly, holding a small device in his hand. It was a scanner, blinking rapidly as he approached. This is why the Helios array existed. You weren't the threat, Karen. You were the signal. But someone out there, someone's been waiting for this moment for decades. Karen turned toward him, her face pale, voice barely a whisper. Waiting for what? To see if you'd survive long enough to come home. A sound emanated from the ship. Not mechanical, not musical. A layered tone, harmonic and ancient, like the groaning of the stars themselves. The ship wasn't just opening, it was communicating, and she understood it. Somehow, in her bones, she understood every vibration. Jake saw her expression shift. They're speaking to you now, aren't they? Karen nodded, slowly. They say, My time here is up. That Earth was never meant to be permanent, just a test, an observation. I was placed here for integration, to see if I could blend in undetected. Jake's eyes widened. You were a probe. Karen blinked, dazed. Not a machine. A living echo. A biological relay. The words tumbled from her mouth like someone else had placed them there. I wasn't watching Earth. Earth was watching me. Suddenly, images flooded her mind. Planets orbiting red suns. Structures taller than mountains. Thousands of others like her, scattered across galaxies. Dormant, hidden, waiting. The moment the dish went dark, her recall protocol activated. She wasn't human, not fully. She was the final node of a long-forgotten experiment. Jake took a step back. If you leave, what happens here? Karen turned to him, eyes glowing faintly now. The last mask of humanity. Slipping. That depends. On what? She looked at him with a new kind of awareness. On whether this planet is ready for what comes next. The hatch pulsed. Karen's feet began moving on their own. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt release. A strange calm. Like every anxious HOA memo. Every pointless neighborhood argument. Every lawn rule and committee vote had all been static. Clutter masking the signal inside her. She stood at the edge of the ship, then stopped, turned back, and for one final moment, she was Karen again. She pointed to Jake. Tell them I didn't mean to trigger it. Tell them I was just trying to keep the neighborhood clean. Then she laughed. A quiet, broken laugh that echoed with surreal clarity. Before Jake could respond, the hatch sealed. The ship began to lift. Silent, smooth, graceful. No engines, no flame. It vanished into the clouds without a sound, leaving only wind and stunned silence behind. Within seconds, power returned to every home. TVs flickered on. Phones rebooted, lights stabilized, but Karen was gone. No trace left, except for the strange circular imprint burned into her backyard grass, and the flickering remnants of the scanner Jake dropped when the ship rose. Its screen now frozen with one final readout, recall complete. Status, successful. Other nodes, activating. Jake stared at it. Other nodes. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning.